Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Pan Future Society podcast. Today is Friday, May 19th, 2017, and I'm getting the show out a little bit early because I will be off in the wilderness this weekend for the next 4 days or so. And on the show today, I welcome back author A.C. Hachem. This is his third trip to the show. We've become kind of a regular quarterly geek out thing. Today it's mostly about the summer sci-fi movie schedule and other things about movies in general, and we just completely nerd out for like an hour and a half. So I think this is actually the longest show I've ever done. I need to come up with some kind of award for everyone who actually makes it all the way to the end. So if movies and sci-fi are your thing, stay tuned. And also, it's show number 50. How about that? All right, everybody, welcome to the show, and welcome once again with me here is author A.C. Hachem. Hey, A.C.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. So, this is becoming a bit of a regular thing to have you on the show here. So, if anybody hasn't listened already, go back through the show feed and find the other two shows and listen to that. But since this is one of the sequels, we don't need to rehash the origin story. we can jump right into it and give me the rundown on what you're up to these days.
Well, things are busy. I've been spending quite a bit of time over the course of the last several months promoting my debut sci-fi novel, Dawn of Lagaya. But now that is pretty much coming to its tail end in some form or another. And I actually have been brewing up an idea for my next novel, but I haven't truly begun work on it yet. So I'm kind of gearing up for it mentally anyway. Yeah. It's funny. Obviously, all artists of any kind go about their process in dozens upon dozens of different ways, but I have to kind of prepare myself, and that preparation, that mental preparation can take hours, it can take days, it can take weeks, but I don't really fully engage in a project until I feel like my head's in the right place for it. So I'm kind of just trying to figure out my schedule and trying to figure out exactly how I'm going to go about executing it. But my plan for this summer is definitely to write a standalone novel that is not going to be a sequel to Dawn of Lagaya, actually. And it's going to be a whole new thing. And it's going to be ultra kick-ass, because I'm going to make sure it's ultra kick-ass. And then pursue the solicitation of it come the fall. So that's kind of what's on my radar as far as all things sci-fi are concerned.
Okay.
But in the meanwhile, I'm just trying to have some fun while I'm at it.
Yeah. So did this new book... did you intend to start working on the sequel to Lagaya and just get this other one instead, or?
Yeah, pretty much. My plan from the get-go for a long time has been to write content in the Lagaya universe for a while. But sometimes things don't go according to plan, and sometimes that's a bad thing, and sometimes that's a good thing. But I came up with a concept, and I shared it with a few folks, and they loved it. And it's very sci-fi, but it's also very kind of topical. And I feel like sometimes when it comes to all art mediums, you kind of got to strike while the iron is hot. And I think it's something that has a much narrower scope than something that's as expansive as like a Dawn of Lagaya.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna kind of spend the summer cranking away at it, and we'll see what happens. But so far, I have a good feeling about it, and you won't know till you won't know how to cross that bridge until you get to it first. You know what I mean? But so far, so good. I think it's a good idea. So I guess we'll find out soon enough whether or not it was a good idea.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Well, I look forward to seeing more stories out of you.
Right on.
But we shot some text back and forth a while ago and thought maybe this would be a good time for a summer movie show.
I'm a big film buff, so that's right up my alley. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So there's obviously a few big ones to talk about out there. I also do check in on your blog from time to time, and I always enjoy your movie reviews. And some of your reviews made me think of something I want to get into just about movies in general these days. But I was looking for a list of the sci-fi movies that are coming out this year. And I found MovieWeb.com has a list of 72 movies listed. A lot of them are your direct to streaming or direct to DVD kind of stuff. But even those these days, technology has gotten so advanced that at least they look good.
True. And I've been pleasantly surprised with a lot of the kind of off-the-wall B-list or C-list, no-name, small-budget type stuff that I've watched. Maybe I've just hit a streak of good luck or something lately, but I've been pretty pleased with the stuff that I've been watching along those lines.
Yeah. So I guess since it's fresh in my mind, I would like to start with what seems to probably be the long tent and the long pole in the tent is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Have you seen it?
I unfortunately have not had a chance to see it yet. It's on my to-do list, and this past weekend I went to a wedding, and I won't bore you with the details, but I haven't been able to see it yet.
All right.
But what I can share you is just a silly thought that I had in regards to the first one. And I blame my own comic book ignorance for this. But when I went in to see the first one, I had a very different expectation of what it was going to be versus what it turned out to be.
Oh, really?
I had no idea that that Guardians was going to be this almost like comical, satirical type of Marvel film.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I really thought about the film in hindsight that I realized how freaking awesome it truly was. So I was kind of sitting there during the first half of the film expecting something totally different, like a typical Avengers type of space opera-y type of thing. And then that just goes to show you, even though something's awesome, when you enter a situation with a certain mindset or a certain expectation, and then you're just thrown for a loop, there's like a little adjustment period there. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized, holy cow, that was freaking awesome. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what they do in the sequel. And Chris Pratt's pretty freaking awesome. I think most people would agree on that. It's kind of like a universally known fact. Chris Pratt is awesome. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I might even be able to see it on Sunday or something like that. But if you can give me your spoiler-free take on it, I would love to hear about it.
My all right, I will keep this as spoiler-free as possible. So, all right, it's great. It really is definitely worth seeing, especially if you like Marvel movies, if you like sci-fi movies, if you like the first one, definitely go see it.
Right on.
I don't know. The first one was so great. I don't know if it could be topped. I don't think that's actually possible.
Fair enough.
There's a few things. There's only a couple of things I really have a gripe with. Other things, it's not a spoiler to say that the main plot driver of this Volume 2 is Peter Quill's search for his father. So it's a different kind of story, sort of than the first one was. One thing that kind of surprised me is that we know that the Guardians are going to have something to do with the Avengers Infinity War, but there's absolutely nothing about that in this film. It's totally separate entirely. There's no Infinity Stone involved or anything like that, which kind of surprised me that they didn't even drip a little bit of that in there. But that aside, The only thing that bugged me, as much as I enjoyed the humor of both of these movies, there were a couple of times when I thought the humor was a bit too cartoonish for me, and it was It was distracting.
Okay.
But just just a couple of scenes where I'm like, okay, that's. I know it's a fictional universe set in space and it's all CGI and there's a talking raccoon, but that was just a step too far. It's a strange bar to set in a certain place, but definitely worth seeing. It is certainly a great way to kick off the summer season. I also saw it in 3D. Worth seeing in 3D for sure. And I don't know how movie prices are by you. I feel very lucky living in the Eugene, Oregon area. It's a smaller market, so movies are cheap here. My wife and I saw it in 3D on a Sunday matinee for under $20. So, it's nice to be able to. I don't know. I've been to places where it's like $18 a person to go see it in 3D, but it's definitely
we have our fair share of those around here, and we even have a lot of and this definitely seems to be a trend where theaters are trying to kind of separate themselves by offering much better food, alcoholic beverages, much better seating, so on and so forth.
Yeah, we
but
went
with
to
that
we
comes
had
like
reserve seating.
$22 a ticket price tag or something.
Okay, yeah, we can we can do the reserve seating in 3D pretty cheap here, so I'm lucky that way. So yeah, definitely see it. I did read one review that said it. Marvel has sort of had a sequel slump. Like the second movie of each series has been noticeably weaker than the first, and this one doesn't take that slump. It's definitely Iron Man 2 was not nearly as good as 1. I don't think Thor Dark World was nearly as good as the first Thor. This one is. It doesn't really slump, but I sort of feel like it doesn't move forward the way I thought it would. So,
gotcha.
But that's those are minor, such minor quibbles that I have with it. I'm just kind of searching for something to not like about it when really 99% of it is great to me. So,
and I pretty much walk out of the theater feeling that way for 9 out of 10 films, and I'm sure we're harsher critics than the average moviegoer too. So that all absolutely makes sense to me. But the most important thing I think you touched upon out of everything was probably the first thing you said, that the first one is so good, you're not gonna top that. It'll be very difficult for you to even make something that's on par with something like that, much less top it. And that's why I'm kind of fearful for the Avatar sequel when it finally does rear its head, and also this Blade Runner sequel. I'm not getting my hopes up about any of those films because I know better. So, I don't want to walk in there expecting one thing, and that expectation being a superbly crafted film, and then just walk out of there thinking that was okay, because it's probably going to be okay, and I don't want to be crying on the drive home. But I'm looking forward to seeing it, especially because it's different enough from the superhero film canons, the typical stuff where it almost doesn't feel like you're watching like a 9th Thor film or a 7th Captain America film, because it's quirky enough where it kind of separates itself from all of the other super A-list Marvel characters.
It could be, in a different universe, it's a completely separate thing. Like Marvel doesn't exist, but you still get these movies, and they still stand on their own as great sci-fi films.
Right.
And they're funny, which I'm trying to think of funny sci-fi films, like other than Spaceballs, I can't really think of anything that sets out to be humorous on purpose, And
that could be part of the reason why it feels so different from all the other ones, even though they like to incorporate a lot of like little witty one-liners in most of the Marvel films. Like Iron Man he's always got these super snarky, witty one-liners, right? But you're right. It kind of takes on a different essence compared to the majority of the MCU. So, like you said, it could kind of almost be its own thing and still be just as awesome, which is nice because I definitely need a breath of fresh air from the comic book movie overload. As much as I love them, I don't want them to inundate the box office either. So it's a fine balancing act, and I'm sure the studios are more than aware of that as well.
Well, that's actually gets to one of the points I wanted to discuss too. We've also this year we have just from Marvel, we've got Spider-Man: Homecoming and Thor: Ragnarok coming out this year as well. In addition to several other superhero-themed films, including DC's Wonder Woman. And I almost feel like with a lot of movies, I've seen some that they were better than I expected them to be. They got bad reviews or they didn't do well, and actually it turns out they were pretty good. And I wonder if we're in Marvel's world and the rest of us just live here, and if it's like, or we're in Disney's world. If it's not Avengers or Star Wars, it has such an uphill battle to be considered a good film or to be considered successful.
That definitely is applicable for sure.
Yeah,
no doubt about that.
And I if I'm not mistaken, you're more steeped in the DC universe than I am. So what's your take on what they've been doing and what it looks like they will be doing with the Wonder Woman film?
DC is like the underdog. And if you like rooting for the underdog, you want their movies to be good. And I'm in the same boat. I want their movies to be good as Marvel's movies. They have not been able to execute that. I'm still hoping somewhere that they'll be able to. We've had like a couple of decent, Batman and Superman films, but when you compare their canon to Marvel's and the success of their movies and the revenue and the ratings and everything else, they're like not even close. Yeah. So a lot of people are really hoping Justice League is the film that gets them there. A lot of people were hoping Suicide Squad was the film that got them there. It was not.
See, and that's
something. Something tells me Wonder Woman is not going to be that film either. Yeah. I feel like at this point, so much is riding on Justice League, and if that does a mediocre performance, then I don't know what else to tell you.
Yeah, after that, I guess they'll just reboot Batman for the 40th time,
right?
Because that's the only thing they can consistently make money with. But that's I saw Man of Steel. That's sort of like the first movie in the current, I guess, the Zack Snyder universe. It was okay, but there were things about it I really didn't like, and then I didn't bother with Batman versus Superman or Suicide Squad. Are they good enough to watch, or are they just like don't bother at all?
Oddly enough, I actually enjoyed Suicide Squad. A lot of people had their gripes with it. A lot of critics had their gripes with it. The plot was a little thin. However, Will Smith is a powerful actor, and he always has been. Margot Robbie is a great actress, and she's also beautiful, and that certainly doesn't hurt. Their combination or their dynamic together is excellent. And even though the Joker didn't appear nearly as frequently in the film as a lot of people, including Jared Leto, had hoped, he still does a really good job. A lot of people are always going to be on the Heath Ledger bandwagon and say nobody's going to ever do it like he did it, and there very well could be quite a bit of truth to that. But there's just the costume design is really well done. Some of the acting is top notch, and even if the plot's a little predictable or a little bit thin, it's still a good film because it's Will Smith and Margot Robbie. End of story. Great costumes. Decent action. It's hands down worth a rental or a Netflix or a Redbox or something. Yeah. But But keep in mind, they were hoping that it was going to be what thrusted them into like a Marvel level, we are here, like, hear us roar type of thing. And it did not accomplish that. But that doesn't necessarily mean it was a bad film or anything. I would highly recommend anyone that has even a mediocre interest in sci-fi or the comic book films to absolutely check that out if you haven't done so already. Batman versus Superman, I feel like we could probably have an entire podcast dedicated to just how bad that film was. I don't want to open up that can of worms too wide.
All right.
But what happened with Batman versus Superman, in my eyes, is this. They went for a very different, a very artistic approach. Rather than going with a very safe route, a tried and proven route, they said, you know what, we're going to kind of take a risk here. We're going to gamble. We're going to go out on a limb. And we're going to do something funky. And either it's going to like crash and burn or it's going to soar. And sure enough, it crashed and burned. And it was, I want to say like the first 15 minutes and then I turned it off because I couldn't stomach it anymore.
Wow, that's...
so maybe you have to be a really hardcore indie film purist, the type of person that attends like film festivals, or maybe you just have to be such a diehard comic book fan that you love it regardless, or it's beautiful to you or something. But like I said, I'm a pretty big movie buff, especially when it comes to genre fiction movies, and I love most of them. And if I can't watch a movie in its entirety, then something's wrong with it, especially if it's sci-fi fantasy. So I don't know what else to tell you about that.
Yeah. Usually even something that's mediocre can still be entertaining enough to get through the whole thing, but that's disappointing.
Right. But so it's just all these setbacks and failures, and that's why there's so much up in the air as far as DC and Warner Brothers and their relationship with DC, and anybody that has a hand in these DC movies. Everything is like such a risk right now. It's like I can't even imagine being like a top level, director, producer, composer, actor, anything, and then being pitched a part in one of these DC movies, and then there has to be some hesitation, like, ooh, do I want to go there? You know what I mean? Because we'll see what happens with Justice League. It's all going to come down to Justice League. Hopefully, this Wonder Woman film is pretty awesome. She definitely looks the part. And the costume design looks pretty epic. But even the trailer was a little, I don't know, mundane and anticlimactic. I don't know. It's just normally they put the best parts and the most epic parts of a film in a preview, and the preview's better than the film, and you're supposed to be really rearing to go see a movie when you see the trailer. But if you're left after a trailer thinking that was cool, then what can you expect from the actual film? You know what I mean? So it's not looking very promising, and I think it's all just going to boil down to what they're able to execute with Justice League. And if that is a flop, and it's funny what's considered a flop these days. If a film makes less than $1 billion, it's considered a flop.
Right, exactly. That's, if it doesn't make Disney, Marvel, Star Wars money, then it was a failure.
Pretty much considered a failure, right?
I'm kind
Power Rangers. Now that's a failure. I'm not gonna get tired of making fun of Power Rangers. I'm sorry. I don't even want to talk about Power Rangers, but since we were talking about movie failures, Power Rangers popped. I haven't even seen it, and have no desire to see it. And I just want to laugh at that movie. And the fact that they had the audacity to announce 6 sequels to such a garbage film and a garbage concept and a garbage 6 movies. They had, and then I saw an article yesterday that said maybe those 6 Power Rangers sequels aren't happening after all. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
My goodness. Did you by any chance happen to see that movie?
I did not see it. It's one that, like, if it pops up on Netflix, I might watch it just because anything with tons of cool special effects I might watch. But
right.
Power Rangers was I was a little bit old for Power Rangers when they were popular, 8 years ago, whatever it was, they really broke. So it's not really my kind of thing, but Yeah, maybe when it's free.
It's a prime example of everything not to do when you're making a movie. Maybe not as bad as the recent Ghostbusters reboot, but actually, I take that back. I think I said that backwards. Maybe the Ghostbusters reboot wasn't as bad as Power Rangers. I haven't seen either film, but I can just tell you from a marketing standpoint, because I work in marketing by day. That's what I do by day. So I know all about demographics and marketing and what's going to work and what simply isn't going to work. And these things were kind of like dead before they even started. We're not even talking about the filmmaking or the storytelling.
So you can you can kind of tell what the quality of the movie might be by how they're trying to sell the movie, right?
Exactly. And the Ghostbusters thing was a bad idea, but this Power Rangers thing was even a worse idea. You're taking a bunch of people that are now, like you said, probably at least in their 30s, maybe even early 40s or something, and you're trying to sell them some young adult nonsense, and even the trailer looked so boring and such and again, typically trailers are at least as good as films, if not better. So if I'm watching a trailer thinking, what the hell is going on here, then obviously the film's going to suck. And they're like, oh, well, maybe it'll do good in China and it'll save us. And then I read that it bombed in China too.
Yeah.
So just an absolute freaking disaster. And
it kind of reminds me of the last failed attempt at making a Fantastic Four movie, where I saw trailers for that and I thought, I might want to see that if it wasn't wrapped up in the Fantastic Four label. If this Power Rangers thing had just been some other movie about kids finding, super armor and fighting giant monsters.
Right.
That might have been interesting. I mean, Pacific Rim was an out of the blue, not based on previous kind of material kind of thing, and it was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But because they want to, I'm assuming, as part of the desire to sell more tickets, throw some nostalgia in there. And I wonder if some of these movies were originally written as something else, and then somebody said, we could get this made easier if you slapped some nostalgia on it.
Wouldn't be surprised, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So, speaking of movies made from other source material, that was a very belabored segue, but Ghost in the Shell. I did not see it. I'm interested. It's another one of those movies where I think maybe the reviews of it skewed my viewpoint. Although so many times I found movies with poor reviews I actually end up enjoying. So if it looks interesting, I should just go see it anyway.
Right.
And you saw it. What did you think?
I loved it with a capital L. I absolutely freaking loved it. Now the one little thing that I can say to preface that would be this type of techno, sci-fi, cyberpunk, the Matrix trilogy, Blade Runner, AI robots. This is right up my alley. So I'm going to gravitate toward this subgenre of science fiction, even more so than a space opera, even more so than interplanetary travel. This is my type of sci-fi, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I went and saw it like the first showing on a Sunday morning at like 10 o'clock in the morning. I was trying to get in before they had even opened the doors. And there are going to be those, like those manga purists or people that are very familiar with the source material that are going to have their gripes with it, and that's beyond understandable. And then you throw in a little bit of social justice wars in there and say, oh, Scarlett Johansson's not Asian. Boo. And that's fine. If that's your battle, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
But I thoroughly enjoyed this film. Was it the best film? No. Was it the best story ever? No. Was it the best CG like The Matrix in its prime cutting edge stuff? No. But it was all high quality, and if you like cyberpunk or this type of sci-fi, you'll probably be foaming at the mouth through half of the film. But even if you are a mild science fiction fan, it's good. There's emotion in the story. A lot of filmmakers, once they start uploading things into video editing tools and computer generated graphics, they forget, oh wait, we're supposed to actually care about what's going on. So there's a fair amount of that, and I've definitely noticed a few articles pointing out how she's carved out a little bit of a sci-fi kind of niche for herself, Scarlett Johansson. That is. So she's a great actress. The story's great. I think one of the reasons, aside from everything I already mentioned, that this film kind of threw some people. I tend to kind of read the opening and closing credits of films because, writing stories and books and filmmaking, I'm a little extra invested in this type of stuff. And I noticed that like all three of the executive producers were Japanese. Mm-hmm. And that actually made a lot of sense in why the film was the way that it was and why it didn't do as well as some folks had hoped. And obviously, if you've got three Japanese guys that are probably, they very well, most likely are probably living in Japan and have grown up in Japan, I thought that was a good thing because it put the Japanese flair on the film. And some people said, it was a little bit dry. I'm no Japanese historian, but there seems to be that essence in Japanese culture a little bit. So long story short, before I babble on too long, it felt different from your typical American-made film that has a lot of American decision-making process in it. And I liked it because that helped it retain some of that Japanese manga flavor. And even though they used a white actress or whatever, it still kind of had the essence of that. So that for me was awesome. And I liked that the character seemed a little bit cold and dry, especially the main character, as well as kind of like her her mentor type person. Anyway,
and that's how she's portrayed in the anime anyway. That whole sort of cold, slightly robotic attitude is appropriate for the character.
Right, 100%. And I think the American market isn't as keen to that or as used to that, or it's just, it's not the way it's not our way. And I think that might have thrown some, especially the critics. But I don't know, critics are supposed to be able to decipher stuff like this and kind of distinguish stuff like that. And I thought it was a good thing. I thought the fact that it was produced by a squad of Japanese folks gave it the flair that maybe Scarlett Johansson's Caucasianness maybe took away from it a little bit. So, man, I drop what you're doing tomorrow and go find where you can watch that film. Especially, like I said, if you're a Matrix fan or a Blade Runner fan, it's very Blade Runner-esque.
And I guess we can make a general if you get into a lot of sci-fi and you're looking for new stuff, you'll usually end up watching anime at some point too. We'll just call this a public service announcement. If you're watching a film that was made in Japan for a Japanese audience, expect at least one character to be emotionless. That's usually a typical thing that appears in films, whether it's the main character or there's another character that there's the very stoic warrior type, and then there's also like the cold, emotionless, strange characters too, and you should expect that.
I'm glad at least somebody out there gets it, and hopefully most of the listeners get it too. But yes, and yes, you're absolutely right about that.
So go see that. Do we even need to acknowledge that someone has bothered making another Transformers movie?
we can put that in the same bucket as the all the other movies we talked about. They're not as shitty, which is evident by the proceeds that they generate. But to be frank with you, I don't care what we're talking about unless it's Star Wars or Star Trek caliber stuff.
Yeah.
By the time something is past its fourth or fifth installment, I have checked out, and like I have no interest whatsoever in seeing another Spider-Man film till the day I die for that reason. It boggles my mind that they're still coming out with Spider-Man movies.
I am interested to see what they do with this one, because it has been done to death, and I'm totally on board with bringing Spider-Man into the Avengers universe.
That would be great.
But the standalone movies, at least they're not doing another origin story. But I will be interested to see how they make this movie stand on its own, considering there's, 5 other films to compare it to.
I don't know. Like you said, it's a bunch of folks in suits sitting in a room, not being very creative and rehashing old whatever they think is going to make the most money. Yeah. Very financially driven decisions, and not very artistically driven decisions. Yeah. And that's been a problem in this industry for many moons. But yeah, I could go the rest of my life without seeing another Spider-Man movie, and I'd be A-okay. Yeah. I'd be more interested in like Disney and Fox or whoever the hell owns X-Men to come to some sort of agreement to reintroduce X-Men into the MCU. That would be pretty freaking badass. Yes. And I'm still waiting for my freaking Gambit movie, and I don't know what's taking these people so long. He's like a crowd favorite. Everybody that loves the X-Men loves Gambit. Why we haven't made a Gambit movie yet, I do not understand. And I definitely think there's a huge market for a Tron 3. I've seen sizable petitions for people petitioning for a Tron 3, and it was somewhat in the works and got shelved to make room for other stuff that is deemed more important. But personally, and I know there are a lot of people out there that would agree, I would love to see a follow-up to Tron Legacy. That would be uber badass. There's just so much out there that can be done better, that can be done, that isn't being done, blah, 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 so on and so forth.
There's some movies that are coming out that I wonder if they're like, people keep trying to make the good or great movie that was previously expected, but they didn't do it, so they just try again. I am super skeptical of Alien Covenant. I just don't know. I know where this run of movies is going. They're basically filling in from Prometheus is filling in backstory up to the first Alien movie eventually. But how many times can we do this over and over again? Is it still going to be, can you make a good movie out of this idea, considering that, a lot of people consider Aliens one of the best movies ever made. It's a very high bar that they set. So I don't know. I've seen a couple of trailers for Alien Covenant, and it's like, this just might be more of the same.
I'm pretty sure it goes live on Friday, so we'll find out soon enough. Horror has never been my thing. The marriage of sci-fi and horror is still not my thing. I like happy, uplifting, coming of age stories, not like gooey aliens screaming in my face. Yeah. But I know that is a huge genre in and of its own. So more power to you if you like that sort of thing. Some people get their kicks from, hey, what can scare me, like a roller coaster or something, right? I'm just not one of those people. But I like the brand. I actually liked Prometheus. I didn't think it was, super great or anything, but it was definitely, it skewed sci-fi enough for me where I did enjoy it, but I don't know. I'm probably gonna wait till DVD or Blu-ray to catch this one. To be honest, most likely that's probably what's gonna happen, unless I'm super bored and I've already seen Guardians and I want to go see something else. I might go see it by myself or something, but I'm definitely not. It's not on my to-do list. That's for sure.
One movie coming out that has, in some ways, I think similar to Ghost in the Shell, has difficult source material that it's being drawn from is The Dark Tower.
Ah.
I don't know if you've seen a trailer for that yet.
I'm not super familiar with the story, even though I've got an associate at work that swears by it and tells me it's one of his favorite books and I've got to read it and stuff. But from what I've been seeing so far, especially from the images, it seems like it's brewing up to be pretty decent, but you never know. All the teasers and all the stuff in the world can create the impression of something being awesome, and then it could be another flop. For all we know. Most likely is going to be. Who knows? It could just be a breakout film too. From
what I see about what they're doing, and several years ago when I heard this was being made, I guess Ron Howard was behind it, and it was like it had big names associated with it, and it's super ambitious because Stephen King's Dark Tower series is 7 books. So there's no way you could do this in even a trilogy of movies. It wouldn't work. So they are going to make a trilogy of movies and TV series to fill in between the movies. I guess maybe somewhat akin to the Avengers and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Has done to some extent. I hope it works because I have read it, and I would say it's one of the greatest series of books I've ever read. It also has the best and most frustrating end of any story I've ever read. So no spoilers, I can't give that away at all. But I wonder if people will have the attention span to stay with a story with this big of a scope. It's hard enough. I mean, only the most diehard Lord of the Rings fans will sit through, the director's extended cuts of all 3 films, which I think is something like 12 hours of movie time. This would be something on that kind of a scale too, and I hope it does well. But there's part of me that thinks this is one of those unfilmable stories.
I think you are pretty much going down the right path, because when we've got all these legitimate films that aren't meeting their projections, but we've got 9 different Decepticon and Autobot movies, it just goes to show you where the mass market is. And if you're making indie films, or if you're making genre films, or if you're doing all that stuff, then that's one thing. But filmmaking entities are in the business of quarterly earnings reports, and they don't care about that sort of stuff. They care about selling tickets, and that's why we have 8 Fast and the Furious movies and 8 freaking Transformers movies. So obviously somewhere there's a room full of people that are hoping that the first one catches, so that they can build an entire franchise, or at least it already exists in that form, but an entire television/film franchise around it. But we'll have to wait and see if that happens. My gut tells me it's not based on what we know and everything we've discussed. My gut tells me it's not, and I'm not really too optimistic about Blade Runner 2049 to be honest with you.
Let's talk. I just saw a longer trailer for that the other day. Again, is it one of those stories that I would think I would enjoy more or expect to like more if it wasn't called Blade Runner?
Right. And going back on what you said about Guardians, the first one's too good.
Yeah.
The first one's too good. The first one is a freaking cult classic. You're not going to top it, no matter how hard you try. And then for the, I think it was the director. I think his name is Dennis Villanueva. I think it was him that said that it's better than the original. And I think you just probably put your own foot in your mouth right there when you said that, because why would you see something like that?
Yeah, and it's this kind of a sequel. I off the top of my head, I can't think of other movies that fall into this category, but it's not like the original Blade Runner left us on a cliffhanger. There were some unanswered questions, but they were left intentionally unanswered, and that is one of the things that makes the story great. So it's why? I guess is the big question. Why do you do this now? You know,
Mm-hmm.
there better be a great story. There better be a great story in there to really justify the existence of this movie.
Right. And after I paired his statement with the trailer that dropped just a few days ago,
Yeah.
that's when I felt in my gut it's not going to happen. This isn't going to be what they are hoping it's going to be. You can just tell. Is it going to make money? Yeah. Is it going to be profitable after marketing expenses? It's very likely. Ryan Gosling, women love Ryan Gosling, so any female is going to gladly accompany a male to go see Ryan Gosling on the screen for a couple hours, regardless of what's happening. So that was a great casting decision for sure, from a marketability standpoint. But I just don't see it. I'm going to go see it anyway. Yeah. Because I'm super obligated. I'm going to go see it in the theaters anyway, but I just don't think it's going to be that major blockbuster that they're chalking it up to me. It's probably not going to happen.
Well, you'll have to send me a follow-up then too, and see if you were pleasantly. You're setting your expectations low, so we'll see if it gets over that hump, right?
Yeah, and I'd rather do that than go in there with high hopes and be disappointed.
You know, here's a weird thing about Blade Runner 2. Its release date is October 6th. Now, I know to some extent the summer movie season has been extended from like March through Christmas, but that's late in the year. You know, sometimes the release date of a movie can kind of tell you what they expect it to do business-wise, too. So,
there's a huge element that we haven't even talked about in all of our conversations, and that's the timing of the film and the box office saturation.
Yeah.
So I'm sure everybody would love to release every film they ever made on like Memorial Day weekend. But like those slots are taken up, and then they got to check to see, it's got to be 3 weeks before Star Wars, but it can't be more than 4 weeks after this film. And timing the films is really hard.
Yeah. And now that, as we discussed, it's sort of Disney's world with Marvel and Star Wars. Guardians was May 5th. Spider-Man is July 7th. Thor is November 3rd, and then Star Wars is somewhere around Christmas. So it's like you have to plan, everyone else has to plan their release schedule around Disney now. And now that Disney is releasing 25 movies a year, it's really hard to do.
Pretty much, absolutely. And now that you reminded me, that was another thing that hurt Ghost in the Shell a lot.
Yeah, it was early in the season.
Their opening weekend was completely overshadowed by another film. It slips my mind what it was. It was Beauty and the Beast reboot, or it was something. Another film completely overshadowed it, and that certainly didn't help its efforts either. But yeah, these are absolutely the types of things that these entities have to worry about above and beyond everything else. And it's like, okay, when do we release this film is huge. It can have a huge impact on how the film does. So add that into the mix of the things that can make or break a movie.
Yeah. So another movie that I'm afraid is going to fly under the radar, but I think it will be extremely enjoyable, is Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets.
Yes.
This one I am really looking forward to because it is made by the guy whose name is escaping me at the moment, who did...
I think Luc Besson?
Luc Besson, yes. The Fifth Element, which is one of my favorite movies. It's so visually different from other sci-fi stuff. I think a lot of sci-fi visually sort of generally falls into a few categories. It either looks like Aliens, because there is a lot of horror sci-fi out there. So anytime there's a dark spaceship with drippy humidity on the walls or something, I think of Aliens. It or it looks like Star Wars, or it looks like Star Trek. Or if it's sort of urban, it looks like Blade Runner. And I think that in a lot of ways, Fifth Element doesn't fit any of those categories, so I enjoyed it. It's very colorful. It's funny. It's maybe, yeah, there you go. Fifth Element, is like Guardians of the Galaxy because it's humorous in a way that most sci-fi movies aren't.
Right.
From the look of it, I don't expect Valerian to be humorous that way, but the visuals of it, I'm really looking forward to, and I think similar to the way you were talking about the Japanese cultural influence on Ghost in the Shell, the Valerian movie is based on the Valerian graphic novels, which are French. So I think it may have a different flavor to it too that I'm really interested in.
Yeah, I was not aware of that, and that's definitely interesting. I'm hoping it's great. If anything, it'll be very visually stunning, and that's probably the number one bullet point that I would drop down for Ghost in the Shell was just the aesthetics of it, very visually stunning. So even if you don't like the storyline or whatever, you're just like it's 2 hours of eye candy, right?
Yeah.
So based on what I've seen thus far, it looks like Valerian is definitely going to be in that same boat, and that's okay with me because I appreciate that stuff. But there's only a handful of, there's only a certain segment of folks where the CG can just make the movie for them, and it's good. That in and of itself is enough for them to thoroughly enjoy a movie, but that doesn't apply to all people. So we'll just have to wait and see how well the plot and the storylines executed and stuff. But I'm definitely gunning for it because the visuals looking insane.
Yeah. The other thing that I think can carry a movie is if the characters are really interesting, like Fifth Element. Whatever you might think of the plot or anything like that, the characters themselves are, at least to me, very interesting. There's the variety of characters that it has, I think, can really carry the film. So I'm interested to see if Valerian has characters that are that distinctive as well.
I'm going to see it in theaters, regardless of how it opens, what the critics say, whatever. I'm just going to see it in theaters because along the lines of what you said earlier, I've learned over the course of many years that it's nice to read a couple reviews, but more often than not, I don't agree with them. So that's why I just, based on my own gut instinct, I see what I want to see and I don't see what I don't want to see, and that's that. And usually it pays off. But yeah, that's definitely one of the movies that I'm pulling for. I hope it's really good because that's the type of stuff we need more of, and maybe a fewer Spider-Man films. So I'm hoping it's good. But what I also want to do is I just want to rattle off the names of the films that I've written brief reviews for this year. It's a total of 5 films, I believe. And some of them are really off the wall, and some of them are pretty mainstream. So I want to see what your thoughts are on the ones that you may or may have seen, and then I'll just give you my brief thoughts on the ones that you may have not seen.
Okay.
The first one is a film that I may or may not be a Netflix movie. I don't remember, but it's called I, Boy. Have you heard of this movie or seen it?
I, Boy. No.
Okay.
Don't know anything about that one.
I had this itch maybe a month or two ago where I was looking for just kind of like funky little low-budget B-list type sci-fi movies to indulge in. And some folks on Twitter actually had some good recommendations. So I took a couple of their suggestions, but I also did some browsing of my own. And that was one of the films that I ended up finding and watching. So my thoughts on it are it's okay. For what it is, it is kind of what it is. When you take into consideration the scope of the film, the scope of the promotional efforts that went into the film that are, slim to none, right? It's not bad. It's not a blockbuster by any means, but if you're ever in the mood for, like I said, this like little low budget kind of B-list type of sci-fi movie, especially something you can stream online, it's worth a go. I don't think it was worth my time. Let's just put it that way.
iBoy?
It's called iBoy. Yes.
iBoy. All right.
Right. Exactly. So the next one is something that's very similar, It's Midnight Special. Have you heard of that one?
I have heard of that one. I have not seen it.
So that kind of is in the same boat. I think it's a little bit of a better film than iBoy was.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the quality of the film was a little bit higher. It stars that gentleman from Boardwalk Empire. I totally forget his name. Michael Shannon. It stars Michael Shannon, and so that at least there's some legitimate cast there,
Mm-hmm.
and it's good. It has a very rural setting.
Okay.
The opposite of like a Valerian. No visual stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It has a super almost like I See Dead People, like very rural Oklahoma-y type of feel to it, but it's definitely sci-fi. And you see at the very end, it's very much sci-fi, and it's just about this young boy with some abilities that him and his family don't quite understand, and they're trying to cope with.
Okay.
And this alien world or this alien race that he belongs to is kind of calling out to him, and he's answering these calls. And the end is pretty epic, and it's heavy sci-fi. The ending is anyway. So I would say even more so than iBoy, that one is definitely worth a watch. Check out Midnight Special.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Next one on the list is Warcraft. Did you see Warcraft?
I did not, and I wanted to, and that one is probably a good example of one that I thought maybe I'd want to see that, and then the reviews and its performance put me off on that one, and I shouldn't have let that happen.
I think you're right, and I think that is what happened, because Warcraft was legitimate. It was absolutely legitimate, and I don't know what it takes, to be honest with you, for a fantasy film to make it. I don't know what the secret sauce is to.
Yeah.
This is what you need for a fantasy blockbuster. I don't know what that secret sauce is. Lord of the Rings has it. Hobbits maybe a little less so, but right in the same boat.
Yeah.
Game of Thrones obviously is like a household name, so it has the sauce.
Yeah.
This film did not have that mainstream appeal, but if you are not part of that mainstream, if you're part of the group of people that enjoy sci-fi fantasy, if you're part of a group of folks that are video game folks, and if you fall into any one of those buckets, Warcraft was great. I think you mentioned something about an attention span.
Yeah.
And I think it might also just be the type of movie where it doesn't orcs. What's going to appeal to the mainstream about orcs? I mean, if they're like animated and they say funny things, then maybe that works. Yeah. But these are not. These are warriors. They're not cute donkeys and cute orcs. They're freaking warrior orcs, and they're not animated. So children aren't going to necessarily be drawn to it. Yeah. I don't know why it did super bad.
Do you think it was the general public just dismisses any movie based on a video game? Because I don't think any of them have actually done really well.
I think there's definitely like a negative air to films that are based on video games. It could be that a part of people's fear is that they have a certain level of passion or love for a video game franchise, and they don't want that to be tarnished by a bad film. I don't know what it is, but you're absolutely right. People tend to shy away from films based on video games, and for good reason. They tend to do poorly. Not just from a proceeds standpoint, but from a filmmaking standpoint. So maybe it's another one of those situations where when you have a really good video game, like the entire Warcraft since its inception, or like a Halo or something, where it's just too damn good and is too difficult to top. Yeah, I don't know what it is, but yeah, a lot of people shied away from this. It was a financial disaster, but I really liked it, and I think. Maybe I have more patience than the average moviegoer does for fantasy. Maybe the whole video game history of me playing the original Warcraft video games like freaking 15 years ago. Maybe it was one of those where I kind of like that nostalgic element we talked about. But either way, I'm a little disappointed and saddened by how poorly it did, because it deserved to do a whole lot better than it did. But I suppose that's the way the cookie crumbles, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Got two more for you.
All right.
The next one is Logan.
Yes, I absolutely did see that. That was on my must-see list for sure.
And what were your thoughts?
I absolutely loved it.
Good. Okay, good.
I know it deviates from what the supposed source material is, but I'm not too hung up about that kind of thing. It was a fitting send-off if they have to send off those characters. Makes me a little sad that I'll never see, well, I can't ever say, never with these kinds of things, but Hugh Jackman as Wolverine is probably done, and
right.
I think we'll definitely not see Patrick Stewart as Professor X anymore, and that's too bad. But I thought, I am glad that they made this movie after Deadpool proved that you could make adult superhero films too.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it would have worked with a toned down PG-13 approach.
I agree. I'm right there with you. I liked that aspect of it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that you liked it, because I definitely liked it as well. Again, it's one of those things where when you've already got 3 or 4 or 5 of something, there's really nothing you can do. And unless you're a true prodigy or a visionary of some sort, like a Shakespeare or something, you're not going to be able to make something super enticing after 4 or 5 installments of anything. People are just tired at that point. And I definitely sensed a little bit of it was kind of lackluster, just because it's my 4th or 5th time seeing, and you also see him in all the other like X-Men films and stuff. And I love the character. I've always enjoyed Hugh Jackman's rendition of that character. But I felt like it was very timely. Like if they had wanted to make another 1 or 2 or 3 more, it would have fallen into that Spider-Man category where it's like, I'm okay not seeing any more Wolverine for the rest of my life. So I felt like their timing was adequate. But I definitely enjoyed it as well. So I'm glad you liked it. And then the last one is a very kind of touchy one. It's Passengers.
I did not see it. I meant to. I really wanted to see it because it looked like absolutely the kind of movie I would see, and I just didn't get around to it. And then it didn't do well. Again,
yes, it was another one of those movies that did not do well. You're absolutely right.
The sci-fi drama type of film, I think, it's a difficult kind of film to make, and there aren't as many of them as there are sci-fi action films.
Right.
So I can imagine it had a long hill to climb to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So you saw it. What was your take?
I did see it. I think maybe the marketing folks could have done a better job of creating the right tone before the movie debuted. There was a lot of confusion about the tonality of the film. Mm-hmm. Some people thought it was going to skew way more onto the sci-fi side of things. Some people thought it was going to skew way more to the drama side of things. Mm-hmm. And that type of confusion, I think, hurt its box office performance. I think it was also coming off the heels of 2 or 3 shitty, boring space dramas. And a lot, maybe one of those lately has been good, but all the rest sucked, like Gravity and stuff. So I think people were maybe worried it was going to be another film like that. Either way, when I finally did get around to seeing it, I enjoyed it quite a bit. Referred to previous statement about Chris Pratt being awesome. It's got quite a bit of sci-fi. So if you like the visuals of, spaceships and, futuristic corridors and, it's basically supposed to be like a cruise ship in space that they're on. And the short version is, it's it's better than it was perceived, and it's better than the sales showed. So I would definitely recommend any mediocre to mild to super advanced sci-fi fan. I'm as much of a sci-fi nut as you can possibly be, and I definitely liked it. I didn't think it was too much romance and not enough sci-fi. It was a pleasant surprise. So that's another one that gets 3/4 of the way seal of approval for me. If you're bored and you want to see a $2 movie or something and you like sci-fi, it's not bad at all.
Yeah, cool, very cool.
And that's the movie roundup.
Yeah. Was there anything else on your radar coming up that we didn't talk about?
Between all the trailers I've been seeing and stuff, we pretty much hit everything past, present, and future. The other thing that's an interesting talking point for today is just Star Trek Discovery, because the trailer literally dropped today.
Yeah, I watched the trailer. Did you watch it?
I have seen the trailer, yes.
I am on it.
I am as well.
Its visual appearance is very J.J. Abrams reboot Trek to me. And maybe that's just a function of the times that we live in, because my visual memory of Star Trek goes back to, the last, Enterprise was a prequel, but the last sort of up-to-date Star Trek series that wrapped up would have been Voyager. And even that's 20 years old at this point. So that's the visuals of it did remind me very much of the Abrams reboot, more so than what I expect a Star Trek universe to look like. And they messed with the Klingons, and I just don't know what's going on with those Klingons. I mean, they seem to they look like they're devolved into hive-minded lizard people or something. I don't know what's going on there.
Star Trek is obviously huge shoes to fill. And I feel like a lot of what's been carrying all of the hype around Star Trek Discovery has been Star Trek. And a lot of people have been talking about it for many months now, and they've certainly done a good job of building the hype for it. I'll give them that.
Yeah.
But this trailer does not live up to that hype.
No.
So I'm already worried about what's going to go down. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And plus, I don't know, the way this is happening, I don't know if you followed the story of Axanar, the fan,
a little bit,
the fan
a little
film.
bit, and all the lawsuits and stuff.
Yeah, and I was actually a supporter of the fan film and was really looking forward to it. It absolutely had the classic Trek feel to it. It was the kind of story that Trek would, you expect them to tell. And I'm kind of disappointed with the way it turned out, and I can't help but feel that they went after them, CBS or Paramount went after Axanar so hard because Axanar is set in roughly the same time period that Discovery is happening. So all of a sudden you have this fan film that looks great and could sort of become canon to a lot of people, stepping on the toes of the powers that be.
Right.
And I guess I can kind of see, the intellectual property argument, to make a 2-hour film with someone else's property and not pay for it doesn't seem right either. But at the same time, for all the things that Star Trek has been in the past, CBS and Paramount are not doing anything with it. The 50th anniversary of the show came and went last year with almost no fanfare.
Right.
There should have been, an enormous, something should have happened other than some sort of Star Trek con party happened and that was it.
Right.
I have hopes that there will still be more great Star Trek in the future, but I will have to see how this plays out. Now, if Discovery tells stories the way Star Trek, I think, should tell stories, that could save it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'll get used to the visual look of it, but if it tells the sort of morality tale, negotiating tactics, political type stories, rather than trying to go all out action combat style, I think it could still work. I think it's a little weird too that they're releasing it on the CBS subscription streaming service too.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they're not putting enough of their own weight behind it to actually put it on television anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of almost makes me feel like either they don't really believe in it that much, or they're hoping it gets a whole bunch of people to subscribe to their service.
Sounds like the latter, yeah.
The way that, a lot of people have jumped on board with Netflix because they produce so much of their original content, but then it's only an 8-episode run, so it seems like a very tentative move to make if you really want people to subscribe to your thing.
I don't know. I feel like they watch these types of things like hawks when they launch, and then based on the feedback, then literally the day it debuts, they'll make an announcement where Star Trek Discovery's already been signed on for season 2. So they'll just like literally look at one day's worth of insight and be like, okay, we like this.
Yeah.
I don't know. I really don't. I don't work in those buildings, so I don't know exactly how they function, but.
Yeah.
All I know is there was an immense amount of hype around it, and it's been something that hashtags have been trending for like months now. And then when I saw the trailer for it, and it's trended multiple times today, I was a little underwhelmed. Is all. So
yeah,
I don't know.
I
want it to be good. I really do.
Yeah,
I
think
see, I guess.
If I'm not the only person they're making TV shows for, so sometimes I have to check myself and say, it's not just made for me. It can appeal to other people too.
Maybe someone else will like it.
But I think if I had to pick one thing that's, having not actually even seen any of it, that's disappointing, is that it's a prequel.
Mm-hmm.
That, yet again, so many things, the prequel is like the new thing, and it seems like a cheap way to get your scripts done is to backfill stories that are sort of already known instead of coming up with something original.
Yeah, I think you have to tread that water carefully. I think in any situation it can be done very well, but it has to be done so methodically. It has to be done so tastefully. You have to have the right people involved with the project, people that have a very core understanding of the project's essence. Like how Lucasfilm still has, I believe her name is Kathleen Kennedy, on board. So the Star Wars films never deviate too far from their roots, type of thing. And I don't know exactly who's involved with Star Trek Discovery, but like you mentioned yourself, it already seems like it's starting to deviate too far from classic Star Trek, and we've only seen a freaking 2-minute clip of it, right?
Yeah.
So we're gonna have to wait until we see a much longer trailer or the first episode or something, until we see how much of it is classic Star Trek and just in a modern filmmaking at its core, even though it's a prequel story, and how much of it is Jerry Bruckheimer type of
J.J. Abrams,
or just way too much emphasis on action, way too much emphasis on shoot 'em up, not enough emphasis on everything else. We'll see. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was feeling the same way after seeing the trailer. I was like, this is what all this hype has been around. I mean, it wasn't bad or anything. It just wasn't. It just didn't live up to the hype, really. And sometimes that happens when you either overhype things or start hyping things up too soon. kind of like the balloon deflates by the time it's go time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's kind of, all that hype is kind of like, like you mentioned earlier, the movie trailer has all the best scenes in it, and then you're disappointed when you actually see the movie. Or you see there's scenes in the trailer that aren't in the movie, and it would have been better if they'd kept those scenes in. I wonder if at some point some television studio or movie studio is going to do what some musicians do now, and they will put out the show without ever even telling anybody anything about it or that they were making it. You got every now and then somebody like, I don't know, Beyonce or whoever releases an album suddenly to everyone's surprise. And I don't know, maybe a TV studio should do that. We would have something, maybe I'd have a totally different reaction to Star Trek Discovery if, I just opened up my social media today and everybody was like, oh my God, there's a new Star Trek on TV right now,
Firstly, when I said Jerry Bruckheimer, I meant Michael Bay.
Michael Bay,
not Jerry Bruckheimer. And secondly, if there's any franchise that you can pull off that what you just said, Star Trek would be it. Something with that type of power. Like you said, there's a reason why Beyonce can do something like that. It's because she's Beyonce, right?
Yeah.
So you bring up a very interesting point. It's kind of like the opposite approach of, hey, instead of hyping this up for a year and a half, and then not meeting people's expectations, why don't we just drop something like this, like a freaking hammer, and see how people. And again, if there's anybody that's going to be able to execute something like that, it's going to be the franchise familiarity and power of something as notable as like a Star Trek. So I mean that's a really good point. I don't think there are too many entities out there that can pull that off. But if there was certainly anybody out there that could, it would be Star Trek. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Good point.
Well,
we'll have a summer's end review conversation where we take all this all the predictions that we made about the summer films, and then like, hey, did this actually meet the expectations, or did it suck, or was this surprisingly good? We'll have like a follow up to this.
Yeah, I'll have to watch all the movies I skipped because I expected them to not be good, and then I'll be surprised that they were. I wonder sometimes too if I'm too. I've gotten so used to living in the Amazon Netflix world where I'll look at something and say, oh, it only has 3 out of 5 stars on Amazon. I'm not going to bother watching it. That's I give in to the wisdom of the crowd too much, and I've skipped some things like a while back. I actually watched Terminator Genesis. And I enjoyed it way more than I expected to because it didn't do well. It got bad reviews, and I was like, there's nothing else on. We'll watch it. We'll see. I'm not expecting much, but if I have to watch something just for the sake of watching something, it might as well be sci-fi.
Right.
And I really enjoyed it.
Right.
It's whatever, silliness with screwing with the timeline you want to get into. They sort of, figured out how to deal with the past by basically just erasing it. And it was funnier than I expected. I think Schwarzenegger had more lines than anyone else in the film. They sort of turned the original Terminator on its head and made him very talkative, smart, and funny. And I enjoyed it a lot more than I expected. And that was kind of a reminder to say, if it looks good, see it.
No, you're absolutely right. And there are so many other movies that you would feel that same way about if you took the time to watch them. Same applies to me. All you can do is you can kind of use the information out there as a kind of general guideline, but ultimately something that appeals to the mass market may not appeal to you, and vice versa. So, hell, if anything, you might want to take a second look at some of these films that did really poorly and seek them out and watch those, because you might enjoy those because the mass market didn't appreciate them. And Warcraft is probably a shining example of that. It's a great freaking film that did not make a lot of money. And there's so many movies out there like that, especially when we're in an era of if it doesn't make $1 billion, we're moving right along.
Yeah.
So there's these films out there that are making $750 million, and people are just turning a blind eye to them. It's getting kind of crazy and kind of ridiculous. But Passengers, definitely check that out, and even more so Warcraft, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Cool. Well.
Yes, sir.
I know there were a few summer movies we didn't hit, but War for the Planet of the Apes is probably a really good one that we didn't talk about. I've enjoyed the reboot of that series.
I tend to definitely enjoy them when I see them, but I don't get particularly excited to see them.
Mm-hmm.
It's another one of those things where it's starting to teeter on the edge of we have quite a few of these films already, and the new ones you're showing me are not very different from the ones I had seen previously, and they're good, but they're not great. So they're solid, but you're not going to ever probably run home and, oh my God, I just saw the new Planet of the Apes movie, and I cannot tell you enough good things. I've never felt that way leading one of those films, but they're always kind of just like, a horse you can kind of bet on, and it's a safe bet. They're always pretty decent, but nothing. They don't really deviate from one another too much, and they're all kind of more or less the same. That's the impression that I get anyway. I think I saw the most recent one in the theaters, and I enjoyed it. But again, I was like, okay, well, that was a couple hours well spent, but I wasn't like, man, that was a great movie. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's different. I know I complained about prequels like 5 minutes ago, but technically these new Planet of the Apes movies are prequels.
Mm-hmm.
But they're interesting enough. It's an interesting, I guess, I find the story interesting enough that it's worth telling.
I enjoy them. They're solid. I definitely enjoy them.
I do wonder if they are. So many movies now, it feels like they start out deciding, okay, we have to make a trilogy. And maybe they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 2 movies would have been enough. Maybe 1 movie would have been enough.
Mm-hmm. They don't care about what's enough. If it's generating positive cash flow, we're going to make another one. And that's how you have 8 Fast and the Furious films.
Yeah. Yeah, my wife is super into cars. She's a total gearhead. And I've watched most of the Fast and Furious movies, and even a few of them in the theaters, and even she can't stand them anymore. They've gotten so ridiculous that it's not even, I'm not even sure why anybody goes to see them anymore.
I don't know. I think it's probably just bored high schoolers on a Friday night with nothing better to do. And they can't go to clubs, and they can't go to bars, and they can't do much of anything else. So they're kind of limited to the mall or the movie theater.
Yeah. Yeah, there is a built-in market.
Right.
For just about every movie that gets released, somebody will go see it because there's not anything else to do. I'm just scanning.
It's either that or hanging out in like a Jack in the Box parking lot till 3 o'clock in the morning.
I'm scanning through the movie web list of everything this year. Past page 2, it's pretty much all straight to DVD stuff. But apparently, Flatliners is getting remade. I don't know why. I don't have a problem with remakes on principle, but there's got to be a good reason to do it. Some films I could see. Sure. There's even some that haven't been remade that I'd like to see because you could do the special effects right now, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But Flatliners, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do with that film.
I think you could make an argument for a reason to remake just about every movie, but where you truly have to draw that line is when 9 out of 10 people think you will never make a film that was better than that. And the first thing that comes to my mind, even though it isn't sci-fi, is Scarface. When I started hearing those rumors that they were planning on rebooting Scarface,
really?
I damn near threw up on myself and fell out of my chair.
Yeah, if you either think the technology's better and you want to redo it, or if you think it was an okay movie and there's some reason to do it, but a movie like Scarface is like that's like an iconic, you know, on the list of whoever's 100 best films ever made. Something
Right.
like you can't touch those films.
No, you cannot. And I feel sorry for anybody that thinks they can, or I think they may have shelved that idea from the public backlash, but I certainly hope they did anyway. But yeah, there are just some. This is the line. Don't cross that line. Scarface is on the other side of that line. Don't try to reboot those types of classic films because all you're going to do is piss people off.
Yeah, well, okay, so I just had to look that one up. This is interesting, too, because it's almost like the Coen brothers are apparently the ones making this movie, and Leonardo DiCaprio is involved somehow. Okay, so how do you remake Scarface yet again? If somebody was going to make it, maybe the Coen brothers are the right people to do it?
I don't know. That film just falls into such at the very top end of, like you said, some of the best films ever made. I don't think you can ever find justification for remaking a film like that. I will boycott it if they do. I will not watch that movie. And end the story.
Yeah.
And then I was also very upset when they announced, without properly disclosing the right amount of information, that they wanted to reboot The Matrix. I was ready to hurt people. And then like I think like a day or two later they came back and said, well, no, it wouldn't be a Matrix reboot. It would actually be a Morpheus standalone prequel. Oh, okay. Which I'm still very hesitant to embrace, but at least that's a lot. It's much better for you to say that than to say we're going to reboot The Matrix. No, you're not.
Yeah,
don't you dare.
That sounds like one of those. That's one of those like prequels. Like, yeah, it would be interesting to know, but do we? That can be like a rabbit hole that you fall down and you start just backtracking through all this stuff that doesn't really need to be told. Sometimes
you're right.
Part of the fun of a movie is to be dropped into this world not knowing what's going on, and that's part of the appeal of The Matrix right off the bat is you're right there with Neo not knowing what the hell is going on.
Right.
And if you start backfilling all this information for all the other characters or how the Matrix got to be what it was, or it just seems, well, the obvious answer is it will make money. But there's no other real good reason to do it. And I wonder at this point, I can't imagine that they would get Lawrence Fishburne to do it either. But yeah, that's that down the pipe somewhere is the Han Solo movie, which maybe it will be great, but I don't know. Does it need to be made?
Right. No, you're absolutely right. I think those examples fall into a slightly different category than the Scarface example does. Scarface, don't touch it, right? Yeah. But when you're starting to talk about like a Morpheus prequel, standalone film, or a Han Solo standalone film, the very short version of the response to that is successfully executing those types of movies. Is it possible? Yes, but highly improbable. So you might as well quit before you start.
Yeah,
because the likelihood of you pulling that off is 1 in a million.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I can't even think of a prequel type movie like that really works well.
Right.
I mean, even The Hobbit. I really didn't like the Hobbit films that much. Anyway.
Yep. I think technically it's possible, but it's so unlikely that you might as well not even bother. I highly doubt a team is going to come along that makes a standalone Morpheus prequel that's on par with the original Matrix, and I highly doubt anybody's ever going to make a Han Solo standalone film where people are going to say, "Holy crap, that was like my favorite Star Wars movie ever, better than any other Star." It's just not going to happen, and it's not even going to be on par. It's your best bet is subpar. So why would you make something hoping and praying that it's 80% as good as something else? What's the point of that? Like you said, does that even need to be made? So why even go there? Well, we know why you're going there, for money.
Yeah, really. 80% of the haul from the last Star Wars film is still a pretty big pile of cash.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that financial motivators are the number one motivators before anything else. We've talked about that numerous times, but these are just such it's like quicksand. One wrong step and you're done. So I don't think it's a good idea. I want them to keep making Star Wars movies, but once we're starting to, hey, let's make a Boba Fett movie. Hey, let's make a Han Solo movie. Rogue One worked, but it wasn't based on one character, and it fit very nicely between one trilogy and another, and they tied it in really well, and they executed it damn near perfectly. So all the stars kind of aligned for it. But what's the likelihood of that happening for The Matrix again or Han Solo again? I mean, that was like one really good film for every 499 shitty films. So yeah, once in a while the stars will align and it'll work, but most of the time it will not. So I think it's a very, very shaky ground, and it's a bad idea.
Yeah.
We'll see. But when you're thinking with dollar signs in your eyes, you might disagree with me. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to do some follow-ups and see if any of these come to fruition.
Right.
All right. I think we've covered it. I think this might be the longest show I've ever done. So.
Well, there was a lot of good content to talk about.
Yeah, there are a lot of movies. That's people who think that Hollywood is in decline have not been paying attention.
There's so much more opportunity out there. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Whether it's new stuff or old stuff, you can make a story. You can make a story a million different ways. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Right on.
All right. Well, we can call that a wrap, as they do in the movie industry.
There you go. So fitting.
And we will talk again after the summer movie bonanza is over.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Thank you for being on the show again, AC. Appreciate it.
Sure thing. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Have a good one.
All right, everybody. There's your show. Hope you enjoyed the movie nerdness and strong opinions of the people within. Back to something regular-ish next week, I suppose. I have not picked a topic yet, but if you would like to suggest one, swing by the website, panfuture.org. Drop me an email or message from there. Come find me on Twitter, Facebook. All the links to those places are on the website. So, yes, please do go to the website. Go to the show pages. Do the things with the things. And I will talk to you again in the future.